Alright. Alright, back up a little bit, alright? Give me some air to breathe here while I tell my story. Alright, welcome back. So last chapter, I think, was Witch and the Werecat. And Eragon bumped into Angela the Herbalist and Sullivum the Werecat. And he had some crazy things to say about the future and had his fortune told with the dragon bones. So today, we are continuing that story with chapter 28 of Reading and Plots. Brahm scratched a rune on parchment with charcoal, then showed it to Eragon. "This is a letter A," he said. "Learn it." With that, Eragon began the task of becoming literate. It was a difficult and strange, and pushed his intellect to its limits, but he enjoyed it. Without anything else to do, and with a good, if sometimes impatient teacher, he advanced rapidly. A routine was soon established. Every day, Eragon got up, ate in the kitchen, and then went to study for his lessons, where he labored to memorize the sounds of the letters and the rules of writing. It got so that when he closed his eyes, the letters and words danced in his mind. He thought of little else during that time. Before dinner, he and Brahm would go behind Geode's house and spar. The servants, along with a small crowd of wide-eyed children, would come to watch. If there were any time afterward, Eragon would practice magic in his room, with the curtains securely closed. His only worry was Saphira. He visited her every evening, but it was not enough time together for either of them. During the day, Saphira spent most of her time leagues away, searching for food. She could not hunt near term, without arousing suspicion. Eragon did what he could to help her, but he knew that the only solution for both her hunger and loneliness was to leave the city far behind. Every day, more grim news poured into Term. Arriving merchants told horrific attacks along the coast. There were reports of powerful people disappearing from their houses in the night, their mangled corpses being discovered in the morning. Eragon often heard Brahm and Geode discussing events in an undertone, but they always stopped when he came near. The days passed quickly, and soon a week had gone by. Eragon's skills were rudimentary, but he could now read whole pages without asking Brahm's help. He read slowly, but he knew that speed would come with time. Brahm encouraged him. "No matter. You'll do fine for what I have planned." It was afternoon when Brahm summoned both Geode and Eragon to the study. Brahm gestured at Eragon. "Now that you can help us, I think it's time to move ahead." "What do you have in mind?" asked Eragon. A fierce smile danced on Brahm's face. Geode groaned. "I know that look. It's what got us into trouble in the first place." "A slight exaggeration," said Brahm, "but not unwarranted. Very well. This is what we'll do." "We leave tomorrow or tonight," Eragon told Saphira from within his room. "This is unexpected. Will you be safe during this venture?" Eragon shrugged. "I don't know. We may end up fleeing Term with soldiers on our heels." He felt her worry and tried to reassure her. "It'll be all right. Brahm and I can use magic, and we're good fighters." He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. His hands shook slightly, and there was a lump in his throat. As sleep overcame him, he felt a wave of confusion. "I don't want to leave Term," he suddenly realized. "The time I've spent here has been almost normal. What I would give to not keep uprooting myself, to stay here and be like everyone else, that would be wonderful." Then another thought raged through him. "But I'll never be able to while Saphira is around. Never." Dreams owned his consciousnesses, twisting and directing it to their whims. At times he quaked with fear, others he laughed with pleasure. Then something changed. It was as though his eyes had been opened for the first time. A dream came to him that was clearer than any before. He saw a young woman, bent over by sorrow, chained in a cold, hard cell. A beam of moonlight shone through a bar window, set high in the wall, and fell on her face. A single tear rolled down her cheek, like a liquid diamond. Eragon rose with a start and found himself crying uncontrollably, before sinking back into a fitful sleep. Chapter 29. Thieves in the Castle. Eragon woke from his nap to a golden sunset. Red and orange beams of light streamed into the room and fell across the bed. They warmed his back pleasantly, making him reluctant to move. He dozed, but the sunlight crept off him, and he grew cold. The sun sank below the horizon, lighting the sea and sky with color. Almost time. He slung his bow and quiver on his back, but left Zarok in the room. The sword would only slow him, and he was adverse to using it. If he had to disable someone, he could use magic or an arrow. He pulled his jerkin over his shirt and laced it securely. He waited nervously in his room until the light faded. Then he entered the hallway and shrugged so the quiver set comfortably on his back. Brahm joined him, carrying his sword and staff. Geod, dressed in a black doublet and hose, was waiting for them outside. From his waist swung an elegant rapier and a leather pouch. Brahm eyed the rapier and observed, "That toad sticker is too thin for any real fighting. What would you do if someone comes after you with a broadsword or a flamberg?" "Be realistic," said Geod. "None of the guards has a flamberg. Besides, this toad sticker is faster than a broadsword." Brahm shrugged. "It's your neck." They walked casually across the street, avoiding watchmen and soldiers. Eragon was tense, and his heart pounded. As they passed Angela's shop, a flash of movement on the roof caught his attention. But he saw no one. His palm tingled. He looked at the roof again, but it was still empty. Brahm led them along Term's outer wall. By the time they reached the castle, the sky was black. The sealed walls of the fortress made Eragon shiver. He would hate to be imprisoned there. Geod silently took the lead and strode up to the gates, trying to look at ease. He pounded on the gate and waited. A small grill slid open, and a surly guard peered out. "Yeah," he grunted shortly. Eragon could smell the rum on his breath. "We need to get in," said Geod. The guard peered closer at Geod. "What for?" "A boy left something very valuable in my office. We have to retrieve it immediately." Eragon hung his head, shamefaced. The guard frowned, clearly impatient to get back to his bottle. "Oh, whatever," he said, swinging his arm. "Just make sure and give him a good beating for me." "I'll do that," assured Geod, as the guard unbolted a small door and set into the gate. They entered the keep. Then Brahm handed the guard a few coins. "Thank ye," mumbled the man, tottering away. As soon as they were gone, Eragon pulled his bow from its tube and strung it. Geod quickly let them into the main part of the castle. They hurried towards their destination, listening carefully for any soldiers on patrol. At the records room, Brahm tried the door. It was locked. He put his hand against the door and muttered a word Eragon did not recognize. It swung open with a faint click. Brahm grabbed a torch from the wall and they darted inside, closing the door quietly. The squat room was filled with wooden racks, piled high with scrolls. A barred window was set on the far wall. Geod threaded his way between the racks, running his eyes over the scrolls. He halted at the back of the room. "Over there," he said. "These are the shipping records for the past 5 years. You can tell by the date by the wax seals on the cover." "So what do we do now?" asked Eragon, pleased that they had made it so far without being discovered. "Start at the top and work down," said Geod. "Some scrolls only deal with taxes. You can ignore those. Look for anything that mentions Seether oil." He took a length of parchment from his pouch, stretched it out on the floor, then set a bottle of ink and quill pen next to it. "So we can keep track of whatever we find," he explained. Brahm scooped an armful of scrolls from the top of the rack and piled them on the floor. He sat and unrolled the first one. Eragon joined him, positioning himself so he could see the door. The tedious work was especially difficult for him. The cramped script on the scrolls was different from the printing Brahm had taught him. But looking only for the names of the ships that sailed in the northern areas, they winnowed away out many of the scrolls. Even so, they moved down the rack slowly. recording each shipment of Seathra oil as they located it. It was quiet outside the room, except for the occasional watchman. Suddenly, Eragon's neck prickled. He tried to keep working, but an uneasy feeling remained. Irritated, he looked up and jerked. With his surprise, a small boy crouched on the windowsill. His eyes were slanted, and a sprig of holly was woven into his shaggy black hair. "Do you need help?" asked a voice in Eragon's head. His eyes widened with shock. It sounded like Solumbum. "Is that you?" he asked incredulously. "Am I someone else?" Eragon gulped and concentrated on his scroll. "If my eyes don't deceive me, you are." The boy smiled slightly, revealing pointed teeth. "What I look like doesn't change who I am. You don't think I'm called a werecat for nothing, do you?" "What are you doing here?" Eragon asked. The werecat tilted his head and considered whether the question was worth an answer. "That depends on what you are doing here. If you are reading those scrolls for entertainment, then I suppose there isn't any reason for my visit. But if what you are doing is unlawful and you don't want to be discovered, I might be here to warn you that a guard who you just bribed told his replacement about you, and that this second official of the Empire has sent soldiers to search for you." "Thank you for telling me," said Eragon. "Told you something, did I? I suppose I did, and I suggest you make use of it." The boy stood and tossed back his wild hair. Eragon asked quickly, "What did you mean last time about the tree and vault?" "Exactly what I said." Eragon tried to ask more, but the werecat vanished through the window. He announced abruptly, "There are soldiers looking for us." "How do you know?" asked Brahm sharply. "I listened in on the guard. His replacement just sent men to search for us. We have to get out of here. They're probably already discovered that Geod's office is empty." "Are you sure?" asked Geod. "Yes," said Eragon impatiently. "They're on their way." Brahm snatched another scroll from the rack. "No matter. We have to finish this now." They worked furiously for the next minute, scanning the records as fast as they could. At the last scroll was finished, Brahm threw it back into the rack, and Geod jammed his parchment, ink, and pen into his pouch. Eragon grabbed the torch. They raced from the room and shut the door. But just as it closed, they heard the heavy tramp of soldiers' boots at the end of the hall. They turned to leave, but Brahm hissed furiously, "Damnation! It's not locked." He put his hand against the door. The lock clicked at the same time 3 armed soldiers came into view. "Hey, get away from that door!" shouted one of them. Brahm stepped back, assuming a surprised expression. The 3 men marched up to them. The tallest one demanded, "Why are you trying to get into the records?" Eragon gripped his bow tighter and prepared to run. "I'm afraid we've lost our way." The strain was evident in Geod's voice. A drop of sweat rolled down his neck. The soldier glared at them suspiciously. "Check inside the room," he ordered one of his men. Eragon held his breath as the soldier stepped up to the door, tried to open it, then pounded on it with his mailed fist. "It's locked, sir." The leader scratched his chin. "All right, then. I don't know what you're up to, but as long as the door's locked, I guess you're free to go. Come on." The soldier surrounded them and marched them back to the keep. "I can't believe it," thought Eragon. "They're helping us get away." At the main gates, the soldier pointed and said, "Now, you walk through those and don't try anything. We'll be watching. If you have to come back, wait until morning." "Of course," promised Geod. Eragon could feel the guards' eyes boring into their backs as they hurried out of the castle. The moment the gates closed behind them, a triumphant grin stretched across his face, and he jumped into the air. Brahm shot him a cautioning look and growled, "Walk back to the house normally. You can celebrate there." Chastised, Eragon adopted a staid demeanor, but inside he still was bubbling with energy. Once they had hurried back to the house and into the study, Eragon exclaimed, "We did it!" "Yes, but now we have to figure out if it was worth the trouble." Geod took a map of Aglesia from the shelves and unrolled it on the desk. On the left side of the map, the ocean extended to the unknown west. Along the coast stretched the spine an immense length of mountains. The Hederic Desert filled the center of the map. The east end was blank. Somewhere in that void hid the Varden. To the south was Serda, a small country that had seceded from the Empire after the Riders' fall. Eragon had been told that Serda secretly supported the Varden. Near Sirta's eastern border was a mountain range labeled the Boar Mountains. Eragon had heard of them in many stories. They were supposed to be 10 times the height of the Spine, though he privately believed that was an exaggeration. The map was empty to the east of the Boars. 5 islands rested off the coast of Sirta: Nia, Parlim, Udin, Ilium, and Burland. Nia was no more than an outcropping of rock, but Burland, the largest, had a small town. Further up, near Term, was a jagged island called Sharktooth. And high to the north was one more island, immense and shaped like a knobby hand. Eragon knew its name without even looking. Vroengard, the ancestral home of the riders, once a place of glory, but now a looted, empty shell haunted by strange beasts. In the center of Vroengard was the abandoned city of Dur Urubian. Carvajal was a small dot on the top of Palancar Valley. Level with it, but almost across the plains, sprawled the forest of Du Weldenvarden. Like the Boar Mountains, its east end was unmapped. Parts of Du Weldenvarden's western edge had been settled, but its heart lay mysterious and unexplored. The forest was wilder than the Spine. The few who braved its depths often came back raving mad, or not at all. Eragon shivered as he saw Urubian in the center of the empire. King Galbatorix ruled from there with his black dragon, Shrukan, by his side. Eragon put his finger on Urubian. The Razak are sure to have a hiding place here. You had better hope that isn't their only sanctuary, said Brahm flatly. Otherwise, you'll never get near them. He pushed the rustling map flat with his wrinkled hands. Giod took the parchment out of his pouch and said, From what I saw in the records, there have been shipments of Seether oil to every major city in the Empire over the past 5 years. As far as I can tell, all of them might have been ordered by wealthy jewelers. I'm not sure we can narrow down the list without more information. Brahm swept a hand over the map. I think we can eliminate some cities. The Razak have to travel wherever the king wants, and I'm sure he keeps them busy. If they're expected to go anywhere at any time, the only reasonable place for them to stay is at crossroads, where they can reach every part of the country fairly easily. He was excited now and paced the room. This crossroads has to be large enough so the Razak will be inconspicuous. It also has to be enough so they can trade any unusual requests. Special food for their mounts, for example, will go unnoticed. That makes sense, said Giod, nodding. Under those conditions, we can ignore most of the cities in the north. The only big ones are Term, Gilead, and Senuan. I know they're not in Term, and I doubt that the oil has been shipped farther up the coast to Narda. It's too small. Senuan is too isolated. Only Gilead remains. The Razak might be there, conceded Brahm. It would have a certain irony. It would that, Giod acknowledged softly. What about the southern cities? Asked Eragon. Well, said Giod, they're obviously Urbian, but that's an unlikely destination. If anyone wants to die from Seether oil in Galbatorix's court, it would be all too easy for the Jarl or some other lord to discover that the Empire had been buying large amounts of it. That still leaves many others, but any of which would be the one we want. Yes, said Eragon, but the oil wasn't sent to all of them. The parchment only lists Custa, Drasleona, Argos, and Bellatona. Custa won't work for the Razak. It's on the coast and surrounded by mountains. Aros is isolated like Senuan, which is the center for its trade. That leaves Bellatona and Drasleona, which are rather close together. Of the two, I think Drasleona is the liar. It's larger and better situated. And that's where there's nearly all of the goods of the Empire that pass through at one time or another, including terms, said Giod. It would be a good place for the Razak to hide. So, Drasleona, said Brahm as he sat down and lit his pipe. What do the records show? Giod looked at the parchment. Here it is. At the beginning of the year, 3 shipments of Seether oil. were sent to Drasleona. Each shipment was only 2 weeks apart, and the records say they were all transported by the same merchant. The same thing happened last year, and the year before that. I doubt any one jeweler, or even a group of them, has so much money for the oil." "What about Gilead?" asked Brom, raising an eyebrow. "It doesn't have the same access to the rest of the Empire, and—" Judd tapped the parchment. "They've only received the oil twice in recent years." He thought for a moment, then said, "Besides, I think we forgot something. Hellgrind." Brom nodded. "Ah, yes. The Dark Gates. It's been many years since I've thought of it. You're right. That would make Drasleona perfect for the Razak. I guess it's decided, then. That's where we'll go." ERAGON sat abruptly, too drained of emotion to even ask where Hellgrind was. "I thought I would be happy to resume the hunt. Instead, it feels like an abyss has opened up before me. Drasleona. It's so far away." The parchment crackled as Geode slowly rolled up the map. He handed it to Brom. "You'll need this, I'm afraid. Your expeditions often take you to obscure regions." Nodding, Brom accepted the map. Geode clapped him on the shoulder. "It doesn't feel right that you leave without me. My heart expects to go along, but it reminds me of my age and responsibilities." "I know," said Brom, "but you have a life in term. It is time for the next generation to take up the standard. You've done your part. Be happy." "What of you?" asked Geode. "Does the road never end for you?" A hollow laugh escaped Brom's lips. "I see it coming, but not for a while." He extinguished his pipe, and they left for their rooms, exhausted. Before he fell asleep, ERAGON contacted Saphira to relate the night's adventures. And that is the end of that chapter. And I will read the rest at a later date.